And welcome to Candidates Corner on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop, Henchman Chairman. As always, tonight we've got John Gapso on the big board, and I'm your host, Pat Ford. There are a few purposes for this show. We want to give the Libertarian community an opportunity to meet our wonderful down ballot candidates. We want to challenge them to incorporate a lunch pail voter issues through the prism of a libertarian perspective. And of equal importance, and perhaps it's the most important of all, we want to give our candidates an opportunity to meet the libertarian nation, to stress the importance of, say, a candidate like tonight running for the gubernatorial race in Texas, to libertarian affiliates in Maine and Washington State, Florida, across this nation. The down ballot candidates are not just our future, but they're our present. They represent an amazing cross-section of individuals, personalities, backgrounds, and they represent an amazing opportunity to spread the libertarian philosophy throughout this nation. They are not just stewards potentially of their communities, but they're also stewards of our movement. We're more than just a political party. We're a philosophy, we're a movement, and we're individuals. Every week I posit the same notion that the folks that we're meeting tonight and over the last year, tonight, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, have the potential to be all candidates for the United States presidency, to be a senator, to be a congressman, all of them earning their stripes at the local or sometimes hyper-local offices, introducing the libertarian philosophy to their respective constituency, and building out a movement that's celebrating its 50th anniversary this year and poised to present opportunities out of this pandemic, this morass of spirit and of liberty. So join us tonight now. Andrew Jewell is a candidate for the nomination to be the Libertarian candidate to be governor of Texas. Andrew, welcome to Candidates Corner on LPTV.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Andrew, first of all, tell us a little bit about the race, how this is working. Right now, we're still in the primary phases, if you will, of the nomination to get the Libertarian endorsement to be ultimately the victor, if you will, in the state of Texas. What processes have to take place?
Well, Texas is a convention. We are a convention party in Texas. Mm-hmm. We do not go through the same primary, which is open to a vote where people go to the polls. Instead, counties appoint delegates that go to the state convention, and that is how the candidate will be nominated. And that convention will be held in May of next year.
Excellent. Excellent. So you've got some time. We're really in the very beginnings, if you will, of the formal campaign. When is the Texas State Convention?
It's May 22.
All right.
I don't have the date handy.
Okay. So just literally days then before we actually enter the convention phase. Tell us about yourself. How, we ask this every week, and so it can seem formulaic to some who listen, but ultimately this is really at the root of you as a candidate, since we're more than just individuals running for office, running for power. Ultimately, it's a reflection on you as a libertarian. So tell us a little bit about your libertarian journey.
Well, my journey was twisty and turny, to say the least. I was raised completely apolitical. I was raised that we do not get involved with politics. My parents did not vote. I was a very religious upbringing. So we do not get involved in politics. That's for the world, right? When I moved out on my own through a series of exposures to different things, I ended up motivating myself to get involved, to learn and to hold different positions. I first got involved with the Republican Tea Party movement. That was pre-Ted Cruz. At different times, I've been a Republican, I've been a Democrat, said screw both of them, was independent, and eventually found out that there was a party that largely espouses that individual responsibility and individual freedom that I've always believed in, but never really found a party that identified that way. The best kept secret in politics, I think. I got it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, is this your first run at elective office?
No, it's not. In 2019, late in the year, I got involved with the local county LP, and then shortly thereafter declared to run for Dallas County Commissioner in Dallas County, Texas, against John Wiley Price.
Interesting. If you will, Texas has got rather a unique, if you will, constitutional / governmental setup. Explain the role of the governor and what his powers or her powers might or might not be in respect to the legislature and how laws are created, and give us a sense about Texas politics.
Well, it's nothing like what many people think it is. Unfortunately, because most people don't realize the limitations upon that office, the governor has gotten away with a lot historically. As far as what the office is actually empowered to do, it's actually quite limited. You have the power of veto, which of course can still be overridden. You have the ability to set priorities for the legislation, but the force behind that is minimal. Like, if as governor I say I want to see this happen, they can look at it and essentially go, yeah, we're not going to do that. I don't have the direct authority as governor to make them pass a law. So when other candidates might promise to get this done, I'm going to pass this law. You can only pass that law if it shows up on your desk and all you're doing is signing off on it. A perfect example is, I was involved in the open carry movement prior to Abbott being elected the first time. And one of his big promises was that we would get constitutional carry. We'd have open carry and constitutional carry. And constitutional carry just now got passed by the Senate and is going back to the House to get approval with its amendments. Years and years later, hasn't even made it to Abbott's desk yet. So he made these promises that he can only fulfill if it happens to show up on his desk. The other powers that the governor does have has to do mostly with appointments. Abbott's literally appointed hundreds of people to commissions, to offices, to boards across the state. And that is where the true power lies for the governor. Being able to choose the people that implement certain policies, the people who sit on boards that make decisions that don't necessarily go through the legislature to get things done. And the only other significant power that the governor has is something that's terribly abused, and that is the emergency orders or executive orders. They are only meant to be used, just like at the federal level. Executive orders are supposed to be for an emergency situation to save lives when the legislature does not have the opportunity to act. You have a flood or a disaster or something magnificent and not in a good way happen, you need to respond very quickly. But passing executive orders or writing executive orders about businesses closing, about mandating mask usage, that's terribly inappropriate. And as most executives across the country, executive politicians, that is, they abuse it, and they use it to further their agenda instead of using it only as a last resort.
So the legislature is really the most powerful figure in Texas politics then?
The lieutenant governor, I would say, would be the singular most influential. It's the lieutenant governor that sets the actual agenda for the legislature. He's the one that has to clear things to go to vote before the Senate. That's where the real gatekeeping can happen, stopping good laws from passing, which would mostly be the repeal of a lot of laws, or, he could stop bad laws from even getting to a vote, but instead pushes them through.
So, I mean, clearly that's an anomaly. How does the lieutenant governor become more popular in terms of power vested in the office than, say, well, the governor? Isn't that, would the term be inversion? How does that work? How did that work?
Well, it's the way we've had it here for a while, and it's a lot of small steps. As time progresses, more and more gets shifted onto the lieutenant governor's plate, and the executive becomes more and more a figurehead. But there's still a lot of good that can be done by the office, and what needs to happen is the office needs to be held by somebody who uses only the authority it actually possesses, but uses it for good.
Interesting. Wow, that's I've known that, but it's still, every time you hear it, to a certain degree blows you away. How would you mark the Abbott regime? What are the successes? What are the failures have been as a candidate? Ultimately delivering stump speeches around the state.
Well, he's eventually achieved some things that he promised. And he's handled certain things the right way, not always at the right time. When open carry with a license came across his desk, he did what he said he would do, and he signed it. Obviously, that's not what the organization of open carry was seeking. It was seeking constitutional, but he did come through and do that. He's also held the party line in a lot of ways. And since that's what people elected him to do, to represent the Republican way of doing things, he's done that fairly consistently. The real exception to that was his response to the pandemic, and when he started using executive orders to shut things down. He pissed off about half the state when he used executive orders to shut the state down. And then March of this year, he issued another executive order releasing the mandate he put in place, and he pissed off the other half of the state doing that, saying that, well, he should have kept it going longer. That's why a lot of people are ready for a change, regardless of where they sit, on what side of the aisle or what color flag they wave. He's kind of waffled here in the end of his most recent term, from the strong positions he held to begin with, because he was very vocal in opposing executive orders done by other governors, done by the president, and then abuses them just the same. One thing he does is he will speak against the federal government when they interfere or try to interfere with affairs in Texas. Personally, I feel that he doesn't go far enough. Perfect example is the situation by the border, the federal holding facilities that he allows to the federal government to keep people prisoner without due process within Texas borders. And I personally feel that he should have put a stop to that a long time ago.
What's your personal motivation for running? What's driving you? When I look at a race like Texas, and I've spent some time in Texas, it's got to be a daunting place to campaign in. Dozens and dozens of major media markets, great expanse of space and distance. Wildly different politics from, say, a Houston to a Dallas to a San Antonio. I mean, just it's larger than life. We've always known that. We've always been raised to believe that. But on a practical level, there are so many different Texases within Texas that it can defy the imagination. You're going after this hard, and as someone who's a libertarian, I admire anyone who is facing this as aggressively as you are. What's driving you?
Well, it's just furthering individual liberty and individual responsibility. Some consider it radical. Well, I guess that fits, being part of the radical caucus of the Libertarian Party. But I want to bring what is considered radical to people. That is that you're responsible for your life, and that the government cannot be trusted with anything that you hold dear. Anything the government does can be done better by an individual or by a private entity. And at the end of the day, I want to bring solutions as to what can actually be done by the office that I'm seeking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make promises that I can't keep. I will work towards ending the drug war. I will use the powers the governor actually has. I will stop abusing executive orders like many executives across the country do. I want to bring real solutions, not promises. What can I do? When something that hurts the people of Texas comes across my desk, the legislature is going to have to get used to hearing the word no, because I'm going to veto it if it does not benefit the people. If they want to increase debt and increase the burden on our people, the answer is no. If you want to invade people's lives, tell them what they can do in the bedroom, what they can do with their money, what they can do on their property, the answer is no. And that simple position needs to be held, and it needs to be in front of people. They need to know that that's what people stand for in the Libertarian Party. And I firmly believe that if we can get that message out there, many people would be behind it.
It really is about defining the party to a vast group of individuals for whom have had little contact in person, well, much less in their face, if you will, with what we actually stand for, isn't it?
It is. It is very difficult to get that message out there.
What type of campaign methods are you going to be able to employ in a candidacy like this? You've got a finite period of time and a finite amount of money, and that's not a criticism. That's a reflection of the reality of the libertarian movement. What are some of your ideas about crisscrossing the state of Texas? This isn't one of those places where you can promise to knock on every door, is it?
No, absolutely not. We have almost 30 million people in this state. There's no way I can personally contact everybody. I wish I could. There'd be 30 million great conversations to come from it, I'm sure. One of the methods that I'm planning on using a lot is out-of-home advertising. As you know, and many libertarians who have run know, it is very difficult to get media recognition. In my last race, I sent out hundreds of press release emails to dozens and dozens of media forms, outlets, radio, newspaper, TV, you name it. And I got one sentence mention in one newspaper. That was it, my entire campaign. We can't trust TV, radio, newspapers to carry this money. And it's going to take going places, holding events, crisscrossing with other organizations that are furthering good causes, such as Normal in Texas. Trying to find people who already believe and are active in pursuing things that we support, and cross-referencing with that, or crossing, like you said, those wires and making that connection. There are people who are active, and I believe that if they find out there's somebody running for governor who is serious about the things that they believe in, that they'll help carry that torch as well.
What type of campaign structure have you developed so far in terms of campaign manager, staffing, social media? What approach have you taken there?
Well, I've tried to put together the best team I can get a hold of. Tyler Smith is my campaign manager. He's been very active across the country in the party. He's done a lot of good. My social media person at this time is Penelope Clark. She's done a fantastic job in helping me reach new markets. I'd never been on Twitter before. Recently made that account and started putting that content out there, still learning how it works. She's really helped me get my Facebook page on point and helped me target better. I'm still in the market for, as it were, fundraising personnel. I don't have anybody really taking the charge of that yet, especially with the filing fees that we face in Texas, $3,725 just to be on the ballot for governor. Fundraising is a big thing, and I do need help in that area. But I have several people working on scheduling events, finding events that I can cross and go to. So it's still, like you said earlier, it's still in the very early stages, and I have a lot of organizing left to do. And like I said, I think that once people see that there's a candidate serious about the issues that they're already passionate about, I'll get more and more people joining and carrying that torch as well.
Talk to us about some of these administrative obstacles the state of Texas has put in your way, if you will, and maybe a little bit of the history over the last couple of years as to the kind of roadblocks, in particular, the Republican Party of Texas has played with.
Well, the Republican Party specifically pushed and actually sued the vast majority of our candidates in the 2020 election cycle for not paying the poll tax, as we refer to it, the fees that you have to pay just to be allowed on the ballot. Those fees are legislatively supposed to pay for primaries in the state of Texas. But the Libertarian Party is a convention party, which means we have to fund our own conventions. The primary parties benefit from the money we pay for filing fees, and those parties get tax dollars recycled into their system. We don't. We have to pay for everything ourselves on top of paying the filing fee. So a large number of candidates refused to pay it last year and took it to court. And the Republican Party sued those candidates that didn't pay. I did collect the money and pay the filing fee in my last election because I wasn't going to let them stand in my way. I wasn't going to let them take me off of the ballot because I refused to pay. It's unjust, but the same thing goes this go around. They've just doubled down. They're pushing new bills in to make it even harder on the convention party. And I'm not going to let it stand in the way. So whatever I have to do to pay that filing fee, I'm going to do because I'm going to carry this message forward.
I love your reaction to a statement. Right now, if you will, there's been a significant effort to make voting easier across the United States. State governments, state secretary of states have worked overtime to make sure that anyone who wants to get a ballot, whether they're mailed individually upon request or just indiscriminately, much like one of those home sweepstakes contests where the guy shows up with the signboard and tells you you're going to win $5,000 for life. Regardless of that, the nation is engaged in a tremendous effort to make sure that people have the ability to vote. But at the same time, the same nation and many of the same people are working overtime to make sure that, well, you don't have your choice if, in fact, your choice may represent a grassroots effort. I'm talking about not just the Libertarian Party, but the Green Party, Working Families Party, any one of a number of organizations that, through their own methodology, maybe their own belief system, are working to create a quote-unquote, I'll use the air quotes here from Candidate's Corner, but a quote-unquote legitimate political opposition. If, in fact, you can vote easily, but you simply can't vote for whom you want to, what type of nation does that represent?
Well, it's a dictatorship. I mean, if you don't have your say in who's making the decisions, then you do not have representation. You're being taxed without representation. And this country literally came to existing by defying that mindset. We don't get to say who's making the decisions, so screw you. We want our say. So many people today don't realize that there are third parties trying to represent different ways of thinking. Just like the Republicans sued the Libertarians, the Democrats sued the Greens off the ballot last year. That attack on anybody but the red and blue, Democrats and Republicans, shows that they're not all that different. They're really the same entity. and they're just holding everybody under their thumb. Because as long as you think there's only two options, and those options are both doing the same harm, then you've got it sealed up.
Interesting. Issues. You mentioned the drug war. When you look at the southern rim of the United States, in particular Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, to a certain degree Louisiana, those states really bear the immediate brunt. If I can make light of it and worry about the northern rim with the mass influx of Canadians that are occurring on a daily basis, but I'll spare you that. Immigration is a daily part of the life of most Texans. What are your viewpoints on that? As a non-federal elected official, very often that's that issue is sort of an anomaly. It's more of a dog whistle for most states. Not so in Texas. It's a day-to-day issue. What are your stands on Texas's ability to react to quote unquote immigration? What should Texas be doing? And what's the big picture for you on immigration issues?
Well, like I mentioned, the governor of Texas is responsible for protecting the rights of everybody in the state. It's not hinged on residency or federal paperwork or permission to be in this country because somebody said you're not allowed to be. ICE should have no presence in the state. We can protect ourselves. And the only people we need to protect ourselves from are those who do harm. If someone does harm, it doesn't matter if they're an immigrant or were born right here. They need to be held accountable for what the harm they've done to another person. If there's no victim, if there was no damage, no loss, no harm, then there was no crime. And that includes walking across an arbitrary line. Human beings have the right to go where they will, to make lives where they will. We shouldn't be penalizing people for trying to find a better way. Do some criminals come over here? Yes. We have tons of criminals here. And I'm talking about legitimate criminals, murderers, rapists, thieves, people who hurt other people. They need to be held accountable, of course. But just because someone comes across the border, it doesn't make them one of those people. And you are invading people's lives and infringing on their right to go where they will peacefully by stopping them, by interfering with their ability to migrate, to find new lives elsewhere. The vast majority of immigrants are not seeking to harm anyone. There's the argument about, with them taking government benefits from people who need it. But many of those government programs are highly abused by people who were born here as well. Those programs need to be addressed in a different manner. And keeping people out of our state isn't what's going to fix any of those problems.
There's a meme or a variation on a meme that floats around libertarian circles every now and again. It reemerged last week, and it points out, if you will, and asks the question, why is it that immigrants who are often characterized as layabouts and looking for federal benefits, when in fact they're rounded up, why are they often rounded up at, factories and retail stores? Usually they're rounded up on the job. In America right now, we face, if you will, an employment crisis, and it's not like the usual employment crisis where people are waiting in lines for just the opportunity for a job. We have underemployment occurring at a historic rate. The federal government is incentivizing people to stay out of work at a time when jobs around the nation are left unfilled. Simultaneously, the federal government is inflating our economy and making it, if you will, growth at a white-hot basis by literally printing trillions of dollars, not even billions, trillions of dollars. What role does an immigrant play in the potential growth of an economy?
Getting stuff done. When you want to talk about economics, A lot of it is about getting stuff done, getting materials moved, and creating wealth. That's what all that is. Wealth is created by products changing hands, and they can't change hands if they're not manufactured. I work in a manufacturing environment. We have trouble getting enough people to do the work. We're constantly looking to hire new people, to get enough people to run all the machines, to make all the things. And there are so many people who are just trying to get here and make a life for themselves that they would be happy to come up here and work for the wages being offered, pay their share of tax, and move on with their lives. They're not coming to steal things from people. They're not coming to sit around and just have handouts. Many of the hardest workers I've ever known were here under a fake name, or were here on a green card and couldn't get citizenship for whatever reason, or came here from somewhere else. Whatever the circumstances were behind that, they came here and they worked and they contributed to society and they made things and they increased wealth for everybody.
How does this issue integrate with the war on drugs?
Well, most of the quote unquote criminals found coming over the border are criminals because they are transporting items the government has said should be illegal, namely drugs. Does that make them criminals? They're not hurting anybody by doing that. However, the government does create a violent situation by targeting them as criminals. They also empower those who would use violence to achieve their ends by making it something that only criminals can do. Legalizing not just marijuana, but all forms of drugs would completely rob violent cartels of their power. Violent crimes have decreased in states that have legalized. Violent drug-related crimes, drug deals gone wrong, turf wars, things of that nature stop when you can go to the corner store and buy some marijuana. Whether you use it yourself or not, that's a personal choice, but it should always be a personal choice. And the impact on immigration is people are trying to get away from a violent environment where cartels have the power, they have the weapons, and they are willing to hurt people to continue their wealth. A lot of people who are fleeing here that I've personally spoken with are trying to get away from that. What better way to do that than not have a drug war going on in this country as well? Every interaction that involves quote unquote illegal drugs is an opportunity for someone to get hurt by police, or for police to get hurt by somebody trying to defend themselves from their aggression. And none of that would happen if we would stop targeting people who are not hurting anybody else.
Mm-hmm. I guess the $1 million question, and time permitting, we could get into areas like criminal justice reform, tax reform, but in a place as complicated as Texas, you are clearly capable of delivering a message that answers most of its sentient challenges. How do you do that? What's the methodology? I'm not even talking so much about the mechanical. Obviously, if we had millions of dollars at our disposal, you do television ads endlessly, Facebook ads endlessly. We could have airplanes flying above Galveston and the Padre Island. Is that the name of it? Endlessly, with trailers. And if you've ever seen the movie The Blues Brothers, we could drive around the state with a megaphone. But what part of the audio? How do you communicate what, for many, seems like an overly simplistic response, once thought upon? And you realize is the only response for all these challenges, because ultimately they're always really tied into a handful of issues. All of these problems are blossom from our treatment of these issues, don't they? What mechanism do you plan to use to try and communicate this to as many people as possible?
Very clear, decisive messaging, because you don't have a lot of time to make an impact when you first meet someone or when you're using advertising. It's that first response, that first impression, if you will. They need to ask questions. They need to go, hold on, explain that to me, because that's where we get the opportunity to educate and to really win hearts and minds. So things like ending the drug war, even if it's not something that they're passionate about themselves, that makes them go, how do you see that working? Oh no, the drugs will be everywhere. Everybody's going to die from an overdose. Regardless of how they feel about it, it gets their attention and it brings a conversation forward. Property taxes are a horrible thing that we deal with in Texas. We have the third highest percentage of property tax compared to value in the nation. But according to Wikipedia, we're the 25th ranked in income in the state, or 25th ranked state in the nation on income, average income. That's not equivalent at all. So ending property tax, while not something the governor can do himself, setting that forward as a priority creates a conversation. I'm not going to promise that I can do it because I can't as governor. But when I say that this is a priority, it creates a conversation. And when I say that this is something I will work towards, again, a lot of people I know, my next door neighbor works to pay for his property tax. He'd be retired otherwise. That is a thing that gets people's attention, and really knowing the things that impact lives here in Texas. Like I said, I work in an industrial facility. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have millions of dollars at my disposal. I work the front lines. I do the same thing everybody else in my area does. I work. So I know the things that are affecting us. I know that all of us have a friend or family member who's incarcerated because of the drug war. Full families torn apart by that. So when I say end the drug war, I know that that will get people's attention, regardless of how they personally feel about using whatever drug. It's going to create a conversation. So decisive, radical messaging is what's going to create further conversations, and that's what we need.
Here's an issue that's unique, particularly in this year, to most states. I'm going to say 5 magic words. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which went perhaps from one of the sleepiest concepts / organization / word salad that occupies government to one of national and now international recognition. And I want to point out, if anyone hasn't read Atlas Shrugged, and for many of us it was one of the first books that introduced us to some fairly basic libertarian concepts. But ERCOT is perhaps the extreme example of what happens and what the potential to have happen when government controls gone mad occurs. And I just want to point out that ERCOT capitalized and expanded and expounded, if you will, on a crisis in the making and brought it to a global proportion. And I'm talking about the chip crisis that faces most of the world's manufacturers. And, and again, along the lines of Atlas Shrugged, one problem begets another problem, begets another problem, begets another problem. And you've got a baguette that's almost biblical. In large part, the automobile industry is largely shut down in terms of manufacturing internationally because of a shortage in chip manufacturing that was exacerbated by incredibly enough, it's a multi-billion-dollar crisis by a failed governmental concept in Texas, and it's called ERCOT. What power does the government have over ERCOT? Tell us a little bit about that, and what do we do? What can we do? What do you think, Mr. Jewell?
Well, let me start by explaining how that situation exists. ERCOT is a nonprofit that kind of organizes, if you will, the various electrical companies that form the electrical grid of Texas. You think a nonprofit entity would exist separate of the government. It's not government itself, right? However, ERCOT is directly governed by the Public Utilities Commission of Texas, whose chair and committee are appointed directly by the governor himself. The problem is when you have these boards that get to decide how things are going to go in private industries. Mind you, the electrical companies themselves are private industries. However, they're regulated by a nonprofit that's regulated by a commission that the governor appoints. So they don't have the sort of freedom that one would think they should have, especially in a state like Texas that prides itself on being independent and free. Those companies are not allowed to prepare properly for a crisis. Good business sense is you create more than you absolutely have to. But they get penalized for that because of the policies for ERCOT. They literally are fined if they produce too much electricity. They are fined if they create capacity more than their market share of the situation in the power grid. As far as the overall government gets involved and they cause harm. Government doesn't fix problems. Like you mentioned in Atlas Shrugged, the example is when you fix it, you're just moving it. You're just moving the problem over here, and then you move the problem further, and then you move it even further, but you never fix it. And when it comes to government, you never fix it because you do yourself out of a job. Government is in the business of invading your life. And that's the basic premise of understanding how the government works. They want to exert control over your life in whatever way they can. People didn't even know ERCOT existed before the snowstorm happened. Suddenly, everybody's researching, looking, why does this happen? Why does this exist? And even still, because it itself is a nonprofit, it's not liable for the situation, right? Because it doesn't control things. It's regulated by this entity over here. And so you have this situation of shifting blame. But remember that it all starts with an appointee of the governor himself. And it goes downhill from there. When you appoint people who stand to benefit from controlling a monopoly to boards that get to govern private industry, you're creating a situation where the industry cannot sustain a crisis, whatever the crisis is. While I'm not as familiar with the situation of the shipping crisis that was the Suez Canal recently, it's a heavily governed on the international scale situation. How much better would that have gone if the people who made the rules didn't benefit from the rules? And again, it all comes down to the government exists to invade your life and to control your life. The best way to handle this is to remove government from the equation. There should not be commissions, boards, governmental entities controlling private industries at all. Occupational licensing is another aspect of that. I am an industrial electrician by trade. I can't just go into business for myself without paying huge fees, paying the government for huge amounts of testing, paying the government for licensing and permits. Even after you're licensed, now if you have all your certifications or anything, you still have to pay the government for permission for every job you do. The government is not there to make things easier. It's there to control it and to benefit from you, not to benefit you.
You know, what's fascinating is that two of the biggest crises facing America as we look at America post-COVID are directly as a result of government interference. And of course, I'm talking about the jobs crisis, where government unemployment compensation is effectively flipped the job market upside down. It is more profitable in significant parts of the country simply to stay home as an individual and collect a check. And of course, I bring the story to the full conclusion in terms of this rogue Texas electrical grid authority. Ultimately, what happened was in Austin, Texas, there were two significant chip manufacturers that have been sidelined significantly at a worst case moment because of government's failure to be able to micromanage. And of course, it's impossible, right? To micromanage something as fundamental as power. So at the worst possible moment, you took domestic manufacturing for a mission critical component out because of interference in an electrical grid. To quote the immortal, holy shnikes. This really is proof of concept, isn't it, for the libertarian philosophy, isn't it?
Yes, and it shows that government is not the answer. I've seen so many people in Texas, especially as a result of the ERCOT situation, go, well, wait a minute, why does government have involvement in this at all?
Right.
And the other half are going, oh, government shouldn't allow this to happen. But the government being involved is what created this to begin with. Like you said, they isolated in a critical part of the industry because they wanted to hold every little piece. Now, something I've learned in being a supervisor or being in leadership in the past is you let people do what they're good at. The private industry in the electrical business, that's their business. That's what they do. Let them do that. You're the government. You don't do that. You don't know their industry. You have no business interfering in it. They're going to provide what the market needs. That's literally what they're in business to do. Chip manufacturers, any industry, that's what it boils down to. They're in it to fill a need in the market. And so if the need exists and the government stays the hell out of the way, the market will be filled. It'll be taken care of.
Mm-hmm. We enter this part of the show, which is I love, and we call it here at Candidate Corner, we call it shameless self-promotion. And one of the things that's challenging for a lot of candidates is to ask the hard questions. And no, it's not about liberty. No, that isn't about deregulation. No, it isn't about, if you will, quote unquote, transfer payment or the safety net reform. It isn't about criminal justice. It's about asking for money and help. And so tell us how folks can support your candidacy now and into the convention phase. And then should you be the nominee to become the governor of the great state of Texas going forward, and give folks a little bit of a flavor, if you will, of your social media and where they can find out more about you.
Well, my website is up and kicking. It's andrewjewell.org. It's on the screen now and been on the screen a few times. My Facebook page is Andrew Jewell, Libertarian for Governor of Texas. My Twitter is at Jewell Governor, I believe. That's a new thing to me. Like I said, just now getting involved in Twitter. So I would really love for anybody interested in hearing more about me. I realize there's been some questions that I see the tail end of or didn't get the opportunity to address. There's a lot of comments. So I do invite anybody to reach out to me or post on my page directly even and ask these questions, because I love to have these conversations. And I really do want to answer everybody's questions. So I apologize for missing that. But as far as what people can do, of course, the world runs on social media. So like, share, retweet. Also, on my website, on every page is a donate link. Like I said, we have a large filing fee ahead of us, and we can't rely on regular media to carry the message. So if you're interested in helping, if you like what you hear, if you just want to see a different option on the ballot, please donate. It'll help with the out-of-home media advertising, which is mailers and billboards, and mobile billboards is something I've been considering evaluating the cost on. But we have to get it out there, and so money will help. Volunteers, again, are very welcome, whether it's a matter of just liking and sharing content that helps. I could use more people on every team in my campaign. I specifically need people who are active and can help with fundraising. I've got the beginnings of a great social media team, but I can always use more people being involved with that as well. And events, whether you're a libertarian or not a libertarian, but agree with some of the specific issues, the specific positions, and you have events going on, please, by all means, reach out. I'd love to make an appearance, even if it's not for me to speak, just to network with people, to come out and join what you're doing and see what you're doing to further good causes in Texas. I'd love to be involved. Whether that's county affiliates, I've been to a few county affiliate meetings. Like I said, Normal has events going on all over the state. The Texas Nationalist Movement and their Texit efforts, they have lots of events. I've been to a few of those. So, like I said, I love to be at events. I do work full time. I am the chair of the Texas Libertarian Party Radical Caucus. I'm involved with the Libertarian Party Radical Caucus, the national organization as well. And I would love to be involved with whatever you have going on. So that's
how important as a candidate is it to you? And I'm on a mission with this, by the way, I just full disclosure, to receive the $5 and $10 and maybe $25 checks from people that you've never met, people from other states across the country. What signal does it send to you, and what message of a hope does it give to you as a candidate in a challenging state, in a challenging position with a big race in front of you?
It really just reinforces that people support what I'm doing, that they like what I have to say. Before declaring to run for governor, I had quite a number of people ask me to run for governor. And initially my thought was, are you nuts? Why? But they said the same things that I've said about why I'm running, that I have, common sense solutions, and not in the gun control conversation sense. But the fact that I bring real solutions and I understand the limitations of the role that I'm running for. And when people donate, it really does give that hope. Even if it's a $5, $10, what support I get. I'm not buying new cars with this. This is a matter of what I get goes to supplement what I put from my personal money into this campaign. In my 2020 campaign, I didn't receive anywhere near what I personally put into the campaign. I spent thousands on that campaign. But when people throw in and help further the message that I'm trying to put out there, it restores, like you said, and like I said earlier, that hope that people want to see that happen. Activists in this party, whether they run for office, they're involved with caucuses or other organizations, or if they're lobbying, it's often a thankless job. It's something we pour our hearts and souls into because we're so passionate about it. But sometimes people don't realize that they're even noticed, and when you donate, when you volunteer, when you network with somebody who's putting a lot of work into it, it really makes them feel like their work is worthwhile, like they're doing it for a reason.
Excellent. In the minute or two we've got left, and I'd love you to give, if you can, on the fly, maybe that, and if you've got one already, great. Or if not, in some cases, we found that for many folks, it's the beginning or evolution of one. But give us that 2 or 3 minute stump speech, that elevator speech that you want to leave people with about the impact that an Andrew Jewell candidacy can have for the Libertarian Party in the great state of Texas.
Well, I'm running for governor to bring attention to and to bring real solutions to the problems that face us in Texas. We have hundreds of thousands incarcerated for things that hurt nobody. I want to put a stop to that. I want to pardon victimless crimes, the criminals, so-called criminals, convicted of victimless crimes. I want to see the executive branch and the Texas government stop abusing its power, stop throwing around orders for its agenda. And I want to show people that libertarian solutions will benefit them far more than the old red and blue ways of doing things.
Great stuff. Andrew Jewell, he is the candidate for the nomination, if you will, the endorsement of the Libertarian Party of Texas to be the candidate for the gubernatorial race to be the governor of the great state of Texas. Listen, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you got like so many of the warrior candidates that we've got in this movement, this philosophy, this party. You've got a full-time gig. You're doing this as an act of love in the truest sense for folks that you might not ever even meet. I've mentioned this many times on the air, and I'll say it again, that running for political office as a libertarian is a patriotic act, second only to serving in our armed forces for the defense of this nation. Your willingness to extend yourself by financially, time away from your family, the invasion of privacy, the hours on the road, the thankless parts of being a candidate, asking for money, the machinations very often outweigh those minutes of joy when you're in front of a group of people and you get to deliver your message of liberty and love. And so for that, as I do for anyone who runs for office on behalf of the Libertarian Party, the philosophy, the movement, the organization, I give you nothing but thanks and love and support. It's I want to point out, as I do every week, that the folks that you meet on this show that we've had, and I've had the honor of introducing to people across the nation for the year or so that we've been on the air, represent not only the future, but the present of the Libertarian Party. We've got wonderful opportunities now. It can get a little chaotic running for president, but on the grassroots level, on a state-by-state basis, in the towns, the councils, the boards, their houses of representatives, and in tonight's case, running for the governorship of a state like Texas, we've got amazing candidates who are able to deliver our philosophy now. It's up to us as individuals to get out and support them now. The bench is here, and they're working oftentimes in isolated circumstances with the support of their family and their individual affiliates across this nation, delivering a message of liberty and love. But it's up to us as a party to get behind them and to support them morally, always, financially, when we can, on a volunteer basis, if possible. I had the opportunity to work for the Jorgensen campaign, as a volunteer. And on a half a dozen occasions, I reached out to Jackie Perry, who has become something of an expert, if you will, through the miracle of IP addresses, being able to text people in highly focused manners to reach out to them. Those are the talents that we need to employ as a grassroots movement in this nation. Everyone listening to this and everyone who's in an affiliate or a caucus or a club or a state party who knows someone who can be involved in this process. So donate, whether it be time, money, support, social media, whatever you can, to candidacies like this. Buddy, thanks again for joining us and wishing you well, as I wish all candidates well, in the upcoming Texas convention. You've been listening to the Candidates Corner on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop, Henchman Chair. As always, I want to take the time to thank John Gabso, who runs our big board here. He's the one responsible for bringing you graphics and infotainment and great points about individual candidacies. I'm your host, Pat Ford. It is a unique opportunity to serve the party in this nation. I love every single moment of this. Stay tuned for Monday night. We'll again have our affiliate show on 9 o'clock, same bat time, same bat station, if you will. Next Friday, it looks like we're going to have a unique opportunity to deliver this show on the road. More details about that in the coming days, but we'll be hopefully live at a convention, at a campaign fundraiser, bringing to you in person this type of questioning, this type of conversation. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you Monday night. Have a wonderful, safe weekend.